Good morning, FlossTube. It's Julie with Reflections Framing and Stitching. Today is Tuesday, the 21st of April, and I am back for the Chart of the Day video number 18. Now, I filmed number 18 on Saturday, and when I hit the finish button, the computer went and deleted the video. So I tried it a second time, and it shut off in the middle of the recording, and I finally said screw it and bought a new computer. So welcome to my new computer. I hope the volume and everything works fine. I haven't tried it out, so fingers crossed it all goes smoothly. I hope this finds you all well and surviving quarantine. There's a lot more traffic out there today than there has been, and I think people are not staying home like they probably should still. I think it's a mistake to open up too quickly. We'll just be right back where we were at a couple weeks ago if we do. But no one's asking my opinion. So anyway, I hope you had a good weekend. I had a good Sunday. I was here on Saturday, and when I went home, Abby was at the house with Reese, so I got to see Reese from a distance, but at least in person and not just on the, I don't know, can you see a picture? If I hold up my phone, I was going to show you a picture of Reese, but I don't know if it'll work. I know sometimes y'all mess with your screen when you do that, show pictures on your phone, but I don't know how you do that. Just a minute. Let me see if I can find one. I don't know. Can you? No, you can't see that. Oh, darn. Well, she's really cute. But you just can't see her. I don't know what y'all do with your screens to make that happen. Anyway, I got to see her. I didn't hug on her or anything, but I did get to see her. Abby came to the house to pick up some scrapbooking stuff that she left there 10 years ago. And she for some reason thought that was still going to be in her nice, neat little box that she left it in when she quit scrapbooking 10 years ago. But, I've cleaned out that room 4 or 5 different times, and each time I told her, hey, if you want this stuff, you better come and get it, and she never did. So it's either been thrown away or mixed in with my stuff, and so she was a little surprised when she got there, and she couldn't just grab a thing. She did take a few items, but not what she was expecting. So that was nice. Watched the Hallmark movie Saturday night. Sunday, I got up. I got a retreat project finished. I worked on another retreat project. Did some stitching during the afternoon. Made stuffed burgers for dinner. Then did some more stitching in the evening. So had a good day on Sunday. And of course yesterday I was back here. So anyway, I hope you all had a good weekend. I probably said that already, but I hope you did, and I hope your week is going well. I read the comments from last Friday. Don't really remember what they were though at this point, but I did read them, and thank you for commenting and participating. Also want to say thank you again for continuing to support your local needlework shop. We couldn't do it without your support, so thank you again. And we'll move on to today's chart of the day, which is going to be, well, it was Saturday's chart of the day, but now it's Tuesday's chart of the day. Our Hearts from With Thy Needle and Thread. And I chose this. Before I read the back or the inside of it, I chose it because I thought, well, that would make a nice anniversary thing for Dan and I. We'll be celebrating 40 years in August. Sorry, allergies. And I thought, well, that's a nice, it says your heart and my heart are very old friends, which is a nice sentiment. I met Dan when we were 17. Well, I was 17. He was 19. So we've known each other a number of years, and our hearts are very old friends. So I thought it would be a great anniversary thing without being, happy anniversary. And then I read the inside where Brenda writes that that's exactly what this was designed for, was for her 40th year of marriage. So great minds think alike, huh? I just thought it was a really nice, not very large piece. The colors are pretty. I've got this in two. I'm gonna change a couple of the colors just because it's not necessary to use an overdyed. So these are the colors I'll be keeping. And these are the colors I'll be changing. Wood Trail, I'm just going to use 3020, 3021. The Harvest Basket, I'm just going to use 3828. She's using Bunny Honey for the face, and I'm just going to use 950. And then the green, it calls for endive, which, who has endive? Not me, so I'm just going to use Weeping Willow. Fabric, it calls for, if I'm remembering correctly, 36 count Vintage Country Mocha, which, I think is a beautiful fabric. And I tried a lot of different fabrics, and I actually decided that the neutrals were the best for this piece. So we're going to stick with the neutrals. So it would work fine on this. It would look fine on, this is just Zweigart Mushroom or Light Mocha, whichever I think it used to be called Light Mocha and now they call it Mushroom. It'll be fine on that. And even Stars Hollow Blend, which I don't have much of, but Stars Hollow Blend would look good too. So I don't know which color is Stars Hollow. It's just a beige, but it would be good too. Everything would show up. You just want to make sure you pick something that's dark enough for the parchment. And this was supposed to be, I think, Gentle Arts parchment, but again, who has that? So it's Weeks Dye Works parchment. And you could always brighten it up and use a DMC, white or 3865, something like that if you wanted to. Because there's not a whole lot of that used in the piece. So that's the chart of the day. I think it would be a great little sampler to have on the wall. So that leads me to the question of the day, which isn't, it's a question. It's a question. I mentioned that Dan and I met when I was 17. I was a senior in high school at the time. And my brother and sister both went to the same college. I went up in the fall of my senior year to visit the college to decide if that's where I wanted to go. To be quite honest, I didn't really want to go to college, but my parents were very big on getting a college education. I was their big disappointment in life because I did drop out. But I went for a visit in the fall of my senior year. My brother and Dan were fraternity brothers. They were both members of the Teak fraternity. And Jeff being my brother, had apparently held my senior picture up at one of their meetings and mentioned that I was coming up for a visit and would anyone like to show me around. And not quite sure why he would do that, but he did, and three of his fraternity brothers volunteered to show me around, Dan being one of them. The first time I saw Dan was the day I arrived on campus, which was a Friday. And Robin, my older sister, had taken me to the teak house. She was a member of something. And there, they would go do things for the teaks, like their dishes or take them brownies or something. So Robin and I took brownies over there, and the kitchen was a mess, so we stayed to clean up the kitchen. And the first time I saw Dan was as he came in. He was at some intramural thing, baseball or something, and he came in the kitchen door and went running through the kitchen, and he just said hi as he went through. And Robin says, "That's Dan." And at the time, I didn't know that Robin and Dan had a moment. It was never mentioned until much later. But as he went by, I thought, ooh, he's cute. He kind of looks like Sean Cassidy, which I think I've said before that, Sean Cassidy was my boyfriend before Alex O'Loughlin was. And then he got kind of weird. But anyway, Dan kind of resembled Sean Cassidy just from what I saw. So I was very intrigued by that. That night, there was to be a boy-girl pajama party at the teak house, which I didn't know about, or I would have brought something other than my little baby doll pajamas. That was all I had. Had the little puff sleeves and the sweetheart neckline, and they were short. And I was like, I am not going to a fraternity house wearing just this. So I put it on over my jeans and made sure I had a bra on and went to the party with Robin. And that's where I officially met Dan and the other two guys, Rod and Randy. And I started out the evening talking with Randy, but eventually Dan came over and kind of pushed Randy out of the way, and we spent the rest of the evening together playing games like passing an orange from one neck to the other, and there was, I think, a cucumber we passed between the knees. Your typical college games, I guess, for that time. Anyway, Robin wanted to go home, so Dan offered to drive me back to the dorm later on, and he did. And we stood out on the porch of the dorm. Probably 3 hours we stood out there. I think Dan was hoping for a kiss, and it never did happen because I actually had a boyfriend at the time. It just doesn't feel right to be kissing on someone else when you have a boyfriend. And Dan lived, he was 2.5 hours away or 2 hours away from where I lived, and I really didn't anticipate anything coming of that relationship. So he stood out there for 3 hours in vain. We pretty much spent the rest of the weekend together. He was showing me around campus, and we just hung out and talked and had a generally good time. And when I left, he said he would write me a letter. And I said, sure, write me a letter, I'll answer it. Because, at the time, we didn't have internet. So it was letter writing or phone calls, and phone calls were long distance. So it was letter writing. And sure enough, within a couple days, I received a letter from Dan telling me what a good time he had over the weekend. And I wrote him back. And so the relationship continued through letters. And eventually, he decided to come for a visit when my brother came home. That was his excuse, as he was coming with Jeff for a weekend. But it was actually to visit with me. And that started happening on a regular basis. I still had the boyfriend. And I continued to have the boyfriend right up until a week after prom that next spring, which oddly enough, Dan chose that weekend to come for a visit. So that was a little awkward to have my boyfriend Jeff show up. Yes, his name was Jeff, like my brother. And he was a friend of my brother's, which always irritated my brother no end that I always dated his friends. So Jeff showed us up to pick me up for prom, and Dan is sitting on the sofa. A little bit awkward. I did end up, by this time, I kind of knew that I wasn't all that interested in my boyfriend anymore. I was more interested in Dan. So I did end up breaking up with the boyfriend a week after prom. I probably would have broke up with him before, but he'd already laid out the money for the tux and dinner and everything. So I waited for, and he knew it was coming. I mean, he could read the writing on the wall. So anyway, we've been together ever since. We did have one little, when I did go to college, I did go to the same school as what Dan was attending. And I thought it would be a good idea if we saw other people. You know, big pool of fish, and was I sure I wanted the one I had? So we both dated other people for a little while, and it was okay when I was just dating someone, but when he started dating another girl, I decided that probably wasn't a good idea. And then when he had a car accident and probably should have died, he stepped on a live wire getting out of his car after he hit the power pole. And he came to tell me about that, and I realized how easy it would have been for him to have died, and I would have lost him. And I realized that I was actually in love with him. So I told him then that we were done dating other people, and we've been exclusive ever since. So it will be 40 years of marriage, but I will have known him for 43 years, which is a long time, very long time. Wouldn't change anything. He's still my best friend. I still love him to pieces, even though he can be very, very frustrating at times. But I think I chose wisely. My parents were not real happy. I did drop out of college. I did 1 year at college, and then I went to nursing school for half a year. And then I dropped out and married Dan, and he moved me to Wyoming. And my parents thought that was a big, huge mistake, that it would never last. We were too young. But I actually think it was probably a good thing we ended up in Wyoming, because we were literally by ourselves. We didn't know anyone. So we only had ourselves to rely on. And I think that was probably a very good lesson for us, that, instead of turning to others in times of stress, we only had each other to turn to. So I think that helped to cement our relationship. So 40 years this August is what it will be. So here's what I would like from you today. That was a long story, and I'm sorry if it bored you to tears. Here's what I would like you to answer is, how did you meet your significant other? Or tell me about a past relationship that you had, or a fond memory of dating. I have quite a few dating stories. I did tend to always date friends of my brother's, which he would then promptly quit being their friend. I guess he figured if they were seeing me, he couldn't be their friend. So the first guy I ever dated was a friend of Jeff's. And I found out later that he had only gone out with me because he had a bet with some of his friends that he could go all the way with Jeff's little sister. It didn't happen, and he dumped me after maybe 3 dates. Didn't break my heart or anything. The next guy I dated was also a friend of my brother, And my brother had these two good friends. Their names were Lance and Jerry. And I dated Lance first because Jerry had a girlfriend, and I didn't think I ever stood a chance with him. So I went out with Lance. I knew right away that that was not a good idea, and so I told Lance I couldn't go out with him again. And a couple weeks later, then Jerry asked me out, and we were together for about a year and a half. I also think that was a good relationship for me to have because Jerry was older. He was 5 years older than me, and his father was an alcoholic. So Jerry didn't drink, which was the big thing. Everybody in my age group were going over the state line into Iowa because the drinking age was 18 and you could drink over there. But Jerry didn't drink, so it kept me out of that. I think I probably would have followed the crowd had it not been for him. So, but eventually he got to the point he wanted marriage. He was 5 years older. He wanted marriage, and I wasn't ready for marriage. So I did crush his nuts a little bit, and I broke up with him. And I was kind of a cold-hearted little bitch about it too, because I cleaned motel rooms at that time of my life, and he tracked me down at work one day and shut the door, and I was in a room cleaning, and he came in and closed the door and was trying to convince me that he was going to kill himself if I didn't get back with him. And my response to that was, go right ahead, but just keep in mind if you do that, it's not like you're going to get to come back and say, ha, look what you made me do. You're going to be dead. Which I think, looking back, was probably not the nicest thing I could have said. But he did not. He still lives in the area. I've seen him a couple of times from a distance. He eventually did marry. It took him a while. But he did eventually marry and had a child, so I think he survived just fine. And then I started dating Jeff, who I was dating when I met Dan. So I didn't date a whole lot, but I did have, that period of time when I was that fall that I went away to college, that I did date quite a few different guys at that time, and at one point I had 5 different dates on one night, which was kind of hard. I'd take him in the front door, go up to the dorm room. My roommate was there, so it wasn't really a date. But these guys had asked to come over. Oh, hey, do you mind if I stop over tonight? And no, that's fine. And I hadn't put together it was all on the same night. So guy would come in the front, I'd see him out the back, and another one would come in the front, and I'd see him out the back, and so I did that 5. Dan being the last one. Unfortunately, I didn't take the guy before Dan out the back. I was taking him out the front because it was still early, and I wasn't expecting Dan, but Dan showed up early, so they met, which again was awkward. So back to the question of the day. Tell me a funny dating story. Tell me how you met your spouse, your significant other, something about your dating history. And have a great rest of the day. It's beautiful here. I wish I was outside, but I'm not. I'm in here. So I'll open the door after a little while and at least get some fresh air in here. So have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. So far this computer is recording fine. So I should see you tomorrow, barring any other unforeseen technical difficulties. And you guys take care until then. Bye-bye.